Here we go. So, right, we are up to the 2 dots. We did finish the sugya, which was always a sensible thing to do before you miss a share for a few weeks. So we're at the 2 dots, the new sugya, although obviously it's all related, at the bottom of Lamed Vov on the base. Lamed Vov on the base. So, no, you don't think so?
Yeah.
We did quite a bit last year. We did a whole Omid basically, because I wanted to finish the sugya. Pretty much an Omid, yeah. So Omar Rabbi Shmuel b'medor remember stay alovan. So let's go back to the Mishnah a second. Let's just look at the Mishnah and understand what's going on. The Mishnah says, which is an awfully long time ago, beginning of the parak, we're still on the first Mishnah. It's good we spent a year on the sugyas.
Can't be a year.
Nearly. Yeah, we started at the beginning of the summer, I think.
Oh, I was coming from.
We started Cheskas Abatim this time last year. Yeah. That's how it is. Good stuff. Now, Rabbi Shmuel. So the Gemora says basically that the Mishnah, has a machlokes about whether it's 3 complete years. The first opinion is 3 complete years. Rabbi Shmuel says you've got the 3 months at the beginning, 3 months at the end, and 12 in the middle. 18 months. Rabbi Kiva says 1 month at the beginning, 12 in the middle, and then it's 14 months and 1 month in the next year. It's 14 months in total. Rabbi Shmuel clarifies and qualifies what is going on with this, and he says this all applies to stei halovon. Stei halovon is a field of produce that you pick all the fruit in one go. It's one crop. So it's, whatever you're growing. I don't know whatever you're growing, corn. Now I'm just going over the Mishnah. We will be on Lamed Vav base at the bottom, yeah. So and therefore you need 3 years, 3 crops, 3 years. But if it is Avul B'Stei Ilon, he says, if it's a field that has trees growing in it, and the thing about trees is that you can have a variety of crops, different trees. You can have olives, you can have vines, you can have apples, right? And they all produce their fruit at different times, right? And you gather them in, you harvest them when they're ready. And therefore, he says you don't need 3 years. That's the same as 3 years. If you gather in 3 crops, if let's say you've got a big field and it's got grapes in one side, olives in the other, and passion fruit. Is that fruit? Yeah. On another side, right? And then that's 3 years. 3 crops is 3 years. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says. And on that, the Gemora says, right? That's what the Gemora is going on. Omar Abai says Abai midivrei Rabbi Shmuel. We got mid Rabbi Shmuel. Rashi says midivrei. The same thing. From Rabbi Shmuel nishmal Rabbana. We learn the following rule according to the Rabbana. Okay, that as follows: if you have 30 trees, mimata asar lebeisar, planted 10 trees in each beisar, ochal asara b'shonazu, if you consume 10 trees in this year, v'asara b'shonazu, and 10 trees in the next year, v'asara b'shonazu, and 10 trees in the third year, harei zu chazaka, that will be sufficient as a chazaka. And he qualifies and explains, or Shmuel will explain this in more detail. How does this work? He says like this: Lav bi Omer Rabbi Shmuel, top of the next one. But does Rabbi Shmuel not say Chad pira havi chazaka lekulu peri? Fundamentally, Rabbi Shmuel's opinion is that one crop, one fruit, can be a chazaka for all fruits. It's the same as a year, right? The olives can count for all of the fruits. Hachanami here as well. Hani havu chazaka lahani, v'hani havu chazaka lahani. These fruits. These trees can work for these trees, and these trees can work for these trees. And as long as they're sufficiently spaced out to basically count as a field, and we're going to discuss that in the Rashbam, right? You can end up having a situation that you can have, although they require 3 whole years, although they do require 3 whole years, but they will allow you to not have to gather in on the harvest from all the trees in each year. That's the point. That's right. You can have a scenario, even according to the Rabbanon, that always require 3 years because there's a machlokes there. There's the Rabbanon do not agree to this idea of Rabbi Shmuel. You can do it all in 1 year with 3 different crops, so they always require 3 years. But the principle of Rabbi Shmuel, that one that a certain group of trees can count for all the trees, there's no reason why the Rabbanon wouldn't allow that as well in certain situations. That, in a nutshell, is what the Gemora is getting at. And the Gemora Rashbam will explain how this works.
I know previously you don't have to do the whole field. If you're growing something, you just have to grow some of it.
No, we learned that you've got to use the field normally.
Exactly. So you won't use every square inch.
No, but it's got to be normal use. No, that's right. That's exactly the point. That's the point. That is the point. You don't have to use every square inch. You don't have to you've got to use normal usage and whatever. You've got to use normal usage. And
do you have to use the crop all the time? I mean, if you've got 100 trees at once,
yeah,
and only the fruits,
yeah.
And then the next 10.
So in certain situations, that's what we're saying. That's exactly what we're saying. You don't have to use all of the trees. Now, the problem with this is, and this is the principle that we have to use as the guiding principle the whole way through understanding the sugya, is it still needs to be normal use. If it's not normal use, it's not a chazaka. Because if it's not normal use, then the other bloke can say, I didn't object because it's obvious you're a thief. Look at the way you're behaving. You're sneaking a fruit here and you're sneaking a fruit there. You're not normal. Yeah, it's got to be normal use. So it has to be the usage has to be sufficient to be considered normal, which means they have objected. And the fact that he didn't object means he's obviously agreeing that it's yours. Because that's the fundamental principle of chazaka. So we have to see why this is considered to be normal usage, right? You've got loads of trees you're not harvesting. Why not? Okay, so look at the Rashbam. It's the third last Rashbam on the Omid. Medivrei Rabbi Yishmael, Amar Abai, Medivrei Rabbi Yishmael, Nishma Lehu Rabbanon, Hoyle Shloshim B'chol. So that's right. This is Hachigas Sinalai. This is the correct text in the Gemara. V'Hachi Pirusha, and this is the explanation. Yeah. So there's some change that gives the text in the Rashbam to Mid Rabbi Yishmael. From Rabbi Yishmael, the B'Shana Achas, that in 1 year, Havi Chazaka, Besode Achas, B'Sholosh Lekitos, B'Sholosh Mekomes Basada. That in 1 year, it's a Chazaka in one field and you can have Chazaka in just 1 year in one field with 3 different Lekitos, 3 different harvests in 3 distinct places in the field. That is Rabbi Yishmael's rule. Yeah, in 1 year. Kediktani, as the Mishnah says, Kana says to also, you gather in your produce, you harvest your olives, etc., 3 different crops. Midvorov nishmalu rabbanon, from his words, we nishmalu rabbanon. We learn according to the rabbanon, the pligi ole, who disagree with him. As Rabbi Yehuda Omar Shmuel said above. Now, this was directly before this Gemara, we said that Rabbi Yehuda Omar Shmuel said that this whole machlokes is Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, that this idea of separate crops can count as a year, right? But the Rabbanon say it has to be 3 distinct harvests. Remember, they said you have to harvest 3 times olives, 3 times grapes, and 3 times produce or whatever, wheat or whatever. It's got to be the 3 years. Okay, so that's the dispute. Ubol Gimel Shonim, they require 3 years. From Rabbi Shmuel, we can learn what the Rabbanon would say. The leika plukta bein Rabbi Shmuel bein Rabbanon ela b'shana achas v'gimel shonim. Because the whole machlokas between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbanon is only the difference between 1 year and 3 years. That's the only dispute. I will call my Rabbi Shmuel b'shana achas omi Rabbanon v'gimel shonim. But whatever logic Rabbi Shmuel would apply to 1 year, the Rabbanon would apply to 3 years. And therefore, says Ambaye, I can tell you there will be a scenario where the Rabbanon also don't require you to harvest all of the trees. And what is that scenario? Where you have 30 trees planted, and those 30 trees are spread out in such a way that you have 10 trees for a base soil. Base soil is a measure of land, right? Base soil is a measure of land. And you have 10 trees in each base soil. So three base soil, 10 trees in each land, right? 30 trees in total. The base soil, says Rashbam, the base soil, it's a general principle, this is mentioned in the Gemora many times, that you need the area of a space soil of land is required for 10 trees, 10 saplings. 10 saplings require a base soil of land. when you take into account, I used to have the measurements. I thought I had the measurements. Yeah, or whatever they are. They'll tell you there. The clever art scroll will tell you what it is in modern contemporary. How big a base size? They'll probably tell you what it is. But anyway, whatever it is, the point is that you need a base sort of land for 10 trees, 10 plant, 10 saplings. If you have less than a base saw for 10 trees, they're very close together. That's no good. That's like a forest. That's not chazaka. Because you haven't performed the chazaka as people normally are machzik. And more than a base saw, a larger area of land for 10 trees is also not chazaka, but chol hakarka for the whole land. Only the amount of land that is necessary for those trees. Basically, you need to find the Goldilocks. The Goldilocks amount of land. You know what that means?
Not too far, not too far.
Exactly. Right? Not there, just right. Yeah, Goldilocks. You know the Goldilocks, just right. The soup, the porridge. Yeah. But no, there's a genuine thing. There's called the Goldilocks principle.
Right.
This is used in terms of the placement of the Earth. You know that
Yes.
the Earth is not too far from the sun, not too close. That's why life. That's why we're here, basically. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Not too hot, not too cold. So this is the same thing here with the trees. Right. If you position your trees in such a way that there are too many trees, let's say you put 15 or even 12 trees in the size of a base saw, right? You can't be machzik because that's not normal. That's a forest. That's like walking into a forest and saying, I make chazaka. That's not normal usage. Forget it. I don't know how you make a chazaka then. You'd have to uproot some trees. But either way, it doesn't work. Yeah, you don't perform a chazaka because it's abnormal usage. Okay. And if you have, let's say, a larger area of land, you've got 10 trees, we've got a massive area of land, 2 base saw and 10 trees in the whole 2 base saw. So then it's true you can make a chazaka because your trees are planted normally. Nothing wrong with having trees spaced out. Maybe that's what you want. Not a problem with that. So it's not odd. It's not strange. It's not like you're trying to make a chazaka by using the trees. Don't look like a forest. They're okay, but you will not be able to machzik on the whole land because it's too big.
Right.
You'll only be able to machzik, right? On the area of land that is required for the trees. So that means to say, and we're trying to create a scenario where you can use just 10 trees, and that will give you a chazaka for the whole land.
Is this working on the principle? Because, well,
Why?
Is it evenly spaced out?
Too large.
I think the concept is you've got to start at the beginning, which is that you've got to remember it's arable land, right? So the whole ikka of what people do with it is to earn income. So it's not like nowadays if you're a landed gentry, present company excluded, but you would like rewild your land or something. This is the reason why it's not normal usage, because that was your income stream. So you would do it in a certain way to maximize output versus not over ploughing the land versus this versus that.
Yeah.
And so there was a normal methodology about farming, that if you genuinely owned it, you would apply, because otherwise you would be either damaging the land or the crop or not really getting out of maximizing the asset. So it's not, we view it as like, what do you mean bunch of trees, not trees, blah, blah, blah. But this is actually like owning a shop, right? How much produce would you get out of it? And in what way? Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very well explained. That's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. That's
putting a few stalls.
Correct. You say, I own that land, but even though I could have put, 2,000 square foot of offices, I've put a porta cabin and a dock, right? You obviously clearly don't own it. You're squatting, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be, to be fair, David's absolutely right. That's exactly the point. The Gemora is going to give several qualifications to this, which also will help qualify and clarify how it's working. So we have to sort of build this in stages. The Gemora is going to give several qualifications to it. But the principle is exactly as David says, that because we're dealing with farming land, it has to be normal use. Okay. And what's abnormal use is too many crops, too many trees, because that's not how people use the land. So therefore, your whole attempt at chazaka goes out the window. You're in a slightly better place if you don't have enough trees,
Yeah.
because, okay, fine, I don't have enough trees, but I can still, that's not abnormal use of land. The problem is like you say, you're not maximizing the land, and therefore, by me working my 10 trees is not going to automatically allow me to claim ownership of more than the land those trees needed. I'm not going to get 5 acres because of 10 trees. I might get 3 acres, but not 5 acres.
If you've got a whole, is this talking about a base soil or a field?
No, it's a field.
If you've got a whole field,
It's a whole field.
you didn't plant them, but they're there. You've got 10 trees there,
Yeah,
and it's much bigger than you need for a base soil.
right.
Why would you not have a chazaka? That's what it is. That's the land.
No, what do you mean?
If there are only 10 trees, we say you've got to have planted the trees. I think you just have to harvest.
No, you mean that's what it means. It means you're using the trees. That's what you're doing. You're using the trees.
10 in a field that could take 50.
No, you've got 10. You've got 10
Yeah.
spaced out.
Yeah.
You've got 10 spaced out, okay, in the area of a base soil.
It's 50 by 50. Yeah.
You've got 10 that are spaced out across, effectively, that it seems to imply that you've got, no, let's clarify. No, it's like this again, because this we're going to explain in the Gemora. There's two things you've got to establish distinct from each other. Number one, what is the setup of the field? And number two, what are you doing? Right? First thing, let's deal with the setup. Okay, the setup of the field is, the size of this field is 3 base saw, and there are 30 trees. That means, and the trees are spread out in such a way, you've got 10 trees in each base saw. That's what it looks like. Now, the reason why it has to look like that is because if it doesn't look like that, you're going to have a problem. You won't be able to establish a chazaka, either because they're too crowded and therefore chazaka doesn't work, because that's not normal usage. If it's not normal usage, the guy can say, well, I didn't object, because everyone knows you're just messing around in the forest, basically, right? You're not harvesting trees. You're just I don't know, playing cowboys. That's not called usage of, that's not farming, right? As David said, you understand, right? Normal usage is what farmers normally do.
Yeah,
That's what David said.
Based on what farmers normally do.
No,
Yeah. Well, no, you're not wrong. It's a farming Masora. Yeah, it's normal usage of land. Yeah.
I'm saying if you go and pick out a farmer today, he'll tell you.
He'll tell you.
He'll point at the field and say you can get X amount of wheat out.
That's right. That's right.
I say no.
Yeah, and city boys like us will go to him and say, well, why can't I plant more? And say, because you're an idiot.
Yeah, because
it's
you're
not
going
gonna work.
you're going to
either overuse the land or you're underuse it, and you don't know what you're talking about. Of course, well, halacha is always going to be based on the norms of society, right, wherever they are, right? Now, there's the point is right, and the alternative that you have is if the trees are less than that, so you've got 9 trees in each base saw. So that's okay. I can establish a chazaka. Just there's going to be a corner of the field that I'm not going to get a chazaka on, because the land was too big for 9 trees. Okay, right. You understand? So that's the setup, right? That's the setup. Now the question is, what you're doing, and the answer is that you are only using each year. Remember, the point of Rabbana has to be 3 years, but you're only using each year 10 trees. Now, where are those 10 trees? That's the question.
They're in a different base or each year.
So you might.
You're not using the same 10 every year.
That for sure. You're obviously not using the same 10 every year. Yeah, you're moving around. You're not different base saw. How is it possible for you to make a chazaka on just one each year, one base saw each year? How will that cover the whole field? Fun? What? Yeah, so I've got the right answer. The Gemara is going to explain later on that your usage is not 10 trees in one base saw 1 year, 10 trees in the second base saw second year, 10 trees in the third base saw, because then each bit of the field's only got 1 year. Rather, it's 3, 3, and 4. You understand? Spread across the whole field. So the tree, that's why I say you've got to establish the 2 things. The trees are planted normally, 10 base saw, 10 for each field, and your usage is spread across the whole field each year. And the chiddush is that I don't need to use all of the 30 trees each year.
So the chiddush is it's not normal usage.
It is normal usage.
Wouldn't harvest harvest only 3 out of 10.
So you're onto another problem. And that the Gemara resolves with a second qualification, which is that you harvested all the trees that produced fruit that year. The other trees did not produce. That's the scenario.
Yeah, I'm not buying
But you're not buying it. No, because if they did, because why on earth would you do that? If I've got 30 trees, why am I going to pick only 10? That's abnormal usage.
Not 10 identical trees. Being planted in the same environment, why would there only some of them bear fruit and not the others?
Well, they might do. There might be a flash frost on one tree. I don't know.
No,
Okay, no, but that's the fact. That's the case. That's the case. You can't ask kashas on a miser. Pardon?
3, 4, and 3.
3, 4. Oh, yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's dispersed even.
They're not new.
I don't know. We'll see the Rashbam, but I can't remember. But dispersed evenly is the point, right? Dispersed across the whole field. So, in other words, there's two qualifications the Gemara is going to make to this. Okay, the chiddush of the whole thing is to say that I don't need to consume all the fruit, right? Because just like Rabbi Shmuel says in 1 year that one crop can work for others, so too the Rabbanim will say in 3 years that some trees can work for all the trees. But there are two qualifications to that. Number one, you have to use, like Rabbi Shmuel says, when the olives are there are only the olives there. Nothing else is growing. Well, it's not ready yet. Yeah, the grapes are too small. So here as well, you're using everything that's ready at that time, right? At that time, you're harvesting everything that's ready, that's here, ready to be harvested. And number two, clearly, it has to be dispersed equally across the land, because otherwise you're just focusing on one corner each time. So admittedly, we have reduced the scope of of how this might be useful. But
You have a reductio ad absurdum. You could say, well, I'll take one tree here,
yeah,
one tree the next year, one tree the next year, one tree.
no, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. It seems it's got to be a significant enough usage.
So
Yeah.
what point does it?
Okay. Well, let's see the Rashbam all the way through, and then we'll see whether we still got questions remaining. Pardon?
The majority, if you've covered the majority of the land.
No, it's got to be full normal usage. Yeah. Let's see the Rashbam and let's see if your question's still resolved. What? Sorry, Avi. We're at the actually now. Yeah, we're Lamed Vav base, and we are at the bottom of the Amud. The very last Rashbam. If you each 10 each year, it's chazaka. Why? Because it's like you have used the chazaka for 3 years in the whole field. Because you're eating every year, whatever grows, you're eating that year.
But that is normal use.
Yeah,
You can't harvest what's not there.
it's true. That's it. That's exactly the point. Okay, so you're saying what the chiddush is. Okay, so let's just see. Now look at the top Rashbam, top of the next Amud. Look at Rashbam, top of the next one. Love me, Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Chadu Peri, Rabbi Chazaka Lakulu Peri. Does Rabbi Shmuel not say the one fruit is a chazaka for all the fruit? That means to say, Dumokam Azeisim Mahanila Mokam Atzvua Va'akayetz. The place of the olives helps for the place of the produce and the kayetz. That means the kayetz are the figs, right? Okay, this is what Shmuel says. Okay, it's like you've been machzik on all three. The chain and similarly, Kishakana says to also, when you gather in your produce, it's like you made a chazak on all three. Because it's for this reason the cheskas 3, the chazak of 3 years, is in the whole field, right? They had those words in even though you're not machzik in the whole field, you're only machzik the whole field once. That's Rabbi Shmuel. Even though it comes out according to Rabbi Shmuel, but actually I'm only machzik once in the whole field because I've got olives, grapes, and figs, and I'm only doing each one once. But according to Rabbi Shmuel, who says 1 year is 3 crops, so like 3 years, I've done it all, just each one once, right? Hachinami here as well. Cheskas mokum yudilonu shoshanu shonozu. A chazaka of the place of 10 trees for this first year. Chashuvin kilu hechsik nami b'mokum u'esrim. It's considered as if he's machzik as well in the place of the other 20. So too in the second year and the third year, kilu hechsik b'chol shana b'chol ilonos domi. It's like you're machzik every year in all the trees. That is the principle. Now the Gemara brings the two qualifications. Go back to the Gemara. Sorry, so let's just see again inside the Gemara, the Lashon of the Gemara. Let's go back to the beginning just to make sure we understand it. Gemara. Amar Abai mid Rabbi Shmuel Nishma Rabbanan. From Rabbi Shmuel, we understand according to Rabbanan. As follows: if you have 30 trees, which were planted 10 trees in each beisah, if you consume 10 in this year, and 10 in this year, and 10 in this year, this is a chazaka. Did Rabbi Shmuel not say one fruit is a chazaka for all fruit? So Chanami here as well. Hani of chazaka lahani, v'hani of chazaka lahani. These are chazaka for these, and these are chazaka for these. V'hani mili. Now the qualifications. It says the Gemara. V'hani mili, but this only applies hecha deloi afiku acharini. This only applies where they did not produce others. Avalafik, in other words, no other fruit grew. Avalafiku acharini, if the other fruit did grow, v'lo achal, and he didn't bother consuming it, there were other options. There was more fruit, right? Haloi have a chazaka. That's not a chazaka, right? That's qualification number one. Has to be that you're eating all the fruit that's actually growing that year. And harvesting.
Right.
Yeah, we're using the word eating, but we mean harvesting.
Yeah, right.
You don't necessarily have to eat it all.
But because we haven't got through it.
No. You can put it into your
So
deep storage. Yeah, that's not a problem, I think. And the second qualification is the hu de boazei ba'azuzi, which means it has to be split up. But in Aramaic, a bazi is a crack. Bazia is like a crack in the ground, I think, right? So in other words, they're split up, right? They're split up. Right? They're split up. In other words, they have to be distributed across the field. You don't have all the 10 in one place, right? Says the Rashbam, second Rashbam. When is that chazaka with eating 30 trees in 3 years? In such a manner. This is only where no others are produced, because the other 20 did not produce fruit. Only 10 grew fruit that year. Only 10 alone each year. Similar to Rabbi Shmuel, you gather everything that grows in the field. Rabbeinu Chananel, Jeremy has your question. Was it your question, Jeremy? How is it possible? Is it really a bit strange that what was yours, Jeremy? Yeah. How's it possible that fruit can just a bit weird thing that only a few trees are creating fruit? Could go in Benos Shuach. There's a type of fruit called Benos Shuach. There's an English escapes me now. I can't remember. Sycamore. No? I don't know. We'll be there somewhere. Avrami, what does it say in your yeah, but what's the name of the crop? Okay, I can't remember. Yeah, no, but anyway. Anyway, the Benos Shuach, whatever it is, what?
Possible the trees were species of date tree.
Okay, maybe that's what it is. All right. Yeah, okay, fine, there you go. Whatever. That the fruit is only completed, right? Ad gimel shonim. Up to 3 years. It takes 3 years for the fruit to be fully grown. That's how you can have a scenario where you've got 30 trees and only 10 trees are producing fruit each year, because it takes 3 years for fruit to grow. So the trees are different ages.
But then you would have 10 different trees each year.
Yeah, 10 different trees each year. That's what we want. We want that. We want 10. You've got to use all the 30 trees over 3 years. What was that?
Before that, you had 3.
Yeah.
Each field.
Yeah. He didn't plant them, remember. He is claiming to have bought the field. He doesn't have his documentation, see, but that's the setup. It's just when Khalid is just saying, how can you have a setup? We think of a tree of apples, they're all going to produce fruit. The answer is no, because there are different stages of growth. It takes 3 years for these fruits to grow, interestingly, and therefore, because it takes 3 years, you can have a situation where 10 are growing each year. But if they produce honey, if these 30 trees produce kulu, peres, b'chol shana, if all these 30 trees produce fruit every year, and he only eats 10 of them, only consumes harvest 10 of them, the 10 are not a chazaka for the 20. Because he's not consuming all of the fruit, he's revealed by himself He's shown that the field is not his because he hasn't consumed all the fruit. And he's afraid to do a proper chazaka. And that's why the ma'arer, the guy who's claiming it's his, didn't bother objecting because he says you weren't using it normally, but I have a chazaka and it's not chazaka. And that's why it has to be clearly that you are using the fruit normally, right? Okay. Right. It's interesting because Tosfos says, the second Tosfos, he brings Rabbeinu Hananel, that it takes 3 years for them to grow. Okay. And he says the reason why Rabbeinu Hananel says it's talking about B'nos Shuach, because he says the B'shar Elonos, it's 4 lines into that Tosfos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines into the Tosfos, the B'shar Elonos, because other trees, Be'elef Shonim, in 1,000 years, Loi Yera Zeh. This is not going to happen. The B'lamad Elonos, Yiloku B'shidofon, Gimel Shonim. That 30 trees are going to be smitten with some blight or crop disease, right? And the ones which are not smitten 1 year, they're not diseased 1 year, are going to be diseased the next year. And this kind of like strange scenario, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's how it is. Yeah. So there you go. So that's how you're gonna have this story. Now the second qualification is next Rashbam Loshen Bezia crack. When is that chazaka? When you eat 10, consume or harvest 10 each year, only if they're scattered. You consume 3 trees, you harvest 3 trees in each beisah every year. Right? That means you'll be machzik in the whole field. If you harvest 10 trees together in one beisah, in the second year, and the second year, the same thing in the second beisah, and so to the third. That's not chazaka. The kol beisah, because every beisah choshev stay ho'ilon b'fnei atzmai. Every beisah is considered to be a sedei ho'ilon b'fnei atzmai. Is considered to be a separate field, a tree field. I can't make a chazaka on one field and say, well, that's working for the field next door. Clearly not. This is also the same as Rabbi Shmuel. Takona says to us, who talks about the 3 crops. Because he's eating across the whole field. The stumps stay ho'ilon, because the assumption is that a field of trees, the olives and the palm trees, the date trees, are spread across the whole field. Azoy is, that's what he says. That's what happens. And therefore, this is exactly the same as Rabbi Shmuel. The trees are also scattered across the whole field. The crops, with the trees are also scattered across the whole field. And that's the same in our situation as well. So that's it. That's it. That's it. Has it been resolved? You understand? Yeah. 2 qualifications, and according to those qualifications, it comes out that from Rabbi Shmuel we see the same halacha according to Rabbanan. The machlokes of Shmuel and Rabbanan is: can you do it in 1 year, or do you need 3 years? Rabbi Shmuel says 1 year, but you can have and 3 different crops count. So Rabbanan will say the same thing in 3 years. That as long as you use all the trees and they're spread equally across the whole field, you can have, and that's okay, that's enough. You're making chazaka for each year and you'll qualify for 3 years. You'll qualify for 3 years. Yeah. It's okay? Yeah. It still seems a little bit. Yes. The question is, what is the chiddush? Because ultimately, I'm using everything that's there, aren't I?
I can't see this.
Well, you can see it. You can see. You understand the Gemora. It's not. Yeah. You're asking what the chiddush is. I suppose the chiddush simply could be that you might say that by definition it's not normal usage. Okay, so the trees. So I used everything that I could use, but the guy sees you harvesting a few trees here and a few trees there. That's not good enough. That's not a proper use.
There was nothing to harvest. There's nothing to harvest.
Okay, but you're going to argue that, but I'm going to say I didn't. That's why I didn't object, because it was abnormal. It wasn't. It was strange. Yeah, I think you have to say that. I think you have to say that. Yeah. Anyway, that's what the Gemora says. That this is what you see from Yishmael in the Rabbana. Now, the next case the Gemora is as follows: this one had made a chazaka on trees, and this one made a chazaka in land. Now we're coming to what happens if you have a dispute between two different people, effectively two different buyers, over sort of ownership of the land. Let's see the Rashbam to understand the scenario. You have two buyers who purchased a tree, a field which is growing trees, for one person together. And all the land was needed for the trees, because they were planted according to the rules of trees. What are the rules of trees? Well, we learned that no more than 10 trees that they saw, they're spread out evenly. And this is how we can understand this Gemara. Now, this is perfectly plausible. You sell your land to one and you sell your trees to another. Let's say I've got land, it's got great trees and a great land, and I want to do, it's good business for me. I'm going to sell to two people. I'll double up, I'll get more money, because one person will buy the actual land, the other person will buy the trees. Okay?
Does the guy that owns the land get a percentage of trees?
Yeah. No, really the question is the other way around. Does the person who owns the tree, does he have any ownership in the land?
We've had it before.
It comes possibly where we had.
If you own the land, produce of the land.
No, if he owns the land, yeah. If you own the land, then you also potentially, you presumably you'll be able to grow things on the land. But here is different, because here you sell the land to one and the trees to another. And that doesn't mean that you've got rights. How do the rights work? But look, this is very important. This is not talking this Gemara about cheskas gimel shanim. It's a bit confusing. And each one performed a chazaka in his own land. What does that mean? Going to rafak b'porta. This chazaka. Remember, there are different types of chazaka. Yes, there's chazaka of cheskas gimel shanim. We use it for 3 years, and there's chazaka, which is a way of acquiring something. Yeah, Mishnah and Kiddushin. What?
Fix the gate.
Pardon? Yeah. We fix something. So there's karka niknes b'shlosha derachim, b'kesef b'shtar b'chazaka. You can acquire land in 3 ways. You can pay money for it. You can have a shtar, a document, or you can do a chazaka. And that's not chazaka gimel shalim. That's chazaka where you fix it. Rofak b'porta. You dig inside the land. You put a door up. You fix a gate. You do something that shows your ownership, your bilus, by doing something to the land. That's what we're talking about here. He dug in the land a bit. That's what the Rashbam says, which means the owner of the trees, I suppose, he maybe stripped the bark or he cut something down or whatever. Or that's the karka, or he did some work with the land, each one in his own bit. One on the land and one on the trees. The karka of kesef b'shtar b'chazaka, because land can be acquired in one of these 3 ways: kesef, shtar, and chazaka. And we're not talking here about the chazaka of 3 years. But the hedge of Mafarish L'Kamed V'Shnei L'Kochos Mari, and later on the Gemara is going to explain very clearly that we're talking about 2 buyers. 2 buyers. Okay, 2 buyers. Now, so in other words, okay, so let's understand. This is not talking about Gimel Shonim. There's no lost documents and 3 years, anything like that, right? We are simply talking about a scenario of a question of to what degree does each buyer own the land, or what do they physically take ownership of? 2 buyers. There's no dispute over the case. There are 2 buyers who bought from one individual. We both agree that you bought the trees and I bought the land. And the question, and they've both done a chazaka, which is a halachic method of acquiring whatever they bought, either because they've cut something down, or they've chopped something, or they've dug in the land. And the question we're going to see is what do they actually physically acquire? And Rav Zvid says, Omer Rav Zvid, Ze kona ilonos, v'ze kona karka. He says simply, one gets the trees, one gets the land. That's the deal, right? One gets the trees, one gets the land. Why should that be strange? Says the Rashbam, Ze kona karka, Ze kona ilonos, lepero seyen, for their fruit below karka, without land. That means, Shem yovshu ilonos, if the trees dry up, he's not allowed to plant any others in their place. He's only acquired the trees. But Trump is giving you the nafkamina. What is the nafkamina? Because if I don't acquire any land, even the land underneath where the tree is, as soon as the tree dies, I'm finished. That's it. My ownership is gone. And the other guy acquires all the land. Even if there are 3 trees there, the Gemara is going to say in Moiches Asfina is a Mishnah. So there's a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Pei Aleph Amud Aleph. There are 3 parokim, at least maybe 4, I think, in Basra that describe Hilchos Mechira. Right? When you sell things, what are you selling? What is the normative? What are the norms for buying and selling? Right? Yeah. And it says in Moiches Asfina. It says in Moiches Asfina. You can look it up if you've got a full Gemara there. It's Pei Aleph Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says, the Mishnah talks about if you buy 2 trees or whatever, and then the Mishnah says, Kona shlosha, kona karka. If you buy 3 trees from someone, the halacha is automatically you acquire the land. You acquire the land. Now there's a whole discussion in the Gemora as to how close those trees need to be to acquire the land, right? To acquire the land between them, how much land, is it land outside the trees? You understand, like the particulars, but the principle is clear. If I go to you one day, Jeremy has a field, and I say, I'm buying for you 3 trees, and I don't specify anything of land, and you don't specify anything of land, but the din is that I don't just get the trees, I also get the land. I get the land between them, and I get enough space as well. It's called kimaloi oira v'salo, enough for the worker and his basket to stick there and to stand there and harvest it out. So exactly, that would seem to be the case. Yes, if I'm acquiring the land, it would seem to be that actually I presumably could also replant. Yeah, these are all about norms of buying and selling. It's not complicated. The norm, the assumptions when you didn't specify what is included in the sale. It's always good to write a contract, but if you didn't, what was assumed to be the case. Yeah. Now, the problem Rashbam has is like this. We know from the Gemora there in Moiches Asfina that if you buy 3 trees, you buy kona karka tachteim, you automatically acquire the land underneath them, ubeinehen, and between them, v'chutzalahen, and external to them, outside them, kimaloi ora v'salo, the same amount as the basket and as the worker in his basket. So what's the kasha? What have we just said in the Gemara here? It's a contradiction, right? What have we said here? If 2 people buy, one person buys land, one person buys trees. We've just said, Rav Zvid says, this guy gets just the trees, and if they die, he's finished, and the other guy gets the land. We say that by buying 3, you automatically get land along with it. So what's the difference? The answer is obvious, if you think about it.
Buying individual trees?
No.
What, the other guy's got the land?
Yeah, so there are 2 buyers here. If there's one buyer, if I have a field and I sell you 3 trees, there's an assumption that with that you've got a bit of land, right? But if I'm selling land to one and trees to another,
yeah,
and
you bought it.
Then the other person is contradicting my sale, so we have to sort it out between the 2 of you. That's why Shmuel says, that's with one buyer. Who buys trees within his friend's land. The konakarki buys land. Over here, here with 2 buyers who buy together. This one trees in this land. The owner of the land can say to the owner of the trees, just like I don't get any trees. Yeah, you don't get any land. It's all very well you coming to me and saying, I bought 3 trees, I bought 5 trees, I bought 10 trees. Surely I'm entitled to some land. No, because I've got the land. That's the deal. That's what I was going to say later on. So that's what Zvid says. This one gets the trees, this one gets the land. Clear?
Yes.
Must give Rav Papa. Rav Papa has a problem with this, and Cain, if so, Ein loy lebal elonos b'karka klum. There's a problem. There's now catch 22. You've completely checkmated, snookered the owner of the trees, because if you're going to say the owner of the trees owes nothing in the land, in Cain ein lebal elonos b'karka klum, the owner of the trees has nothing in the land. If so, leimale bal karka lebal elonos. The owner of the land can turn around to the owner of the trees and say, what? Uproot your trees, get lost. Right. Have your trees. Yeah, do you see the problem? It can't be that the owner of the trees has nothing in the land, because it leads to a manifestly unjust outcome. You know what that's called in law? There's a word for it. What's it called again? No. There's a specific legal term. Something where the outcome is the outcome is unjust. No. It's one word. Not just. It's not. No, it's not justice. It's a word that it's not. It doesn't fit according to the principles of. It's something to do with fairness. It's a it's a Jew. Okay, all right. I don't know. It's irritating. No. It's one word. It's one word. And equity. That's the word. It's not equitable. I think that's the word. It has to be an equitable solution, right? And that can work here as well. That's really what Rav Papa is saying. In other words, yes. Strictly speaking, absolute legal conclusion, you get the trees. But it's not fair because I can't grow my trees. So clearly that's not fair, right? So therefore, he says, Al-Amar Rav Papa, equity is a principle that operates within a legal system. It's not, and there is. Well, that's Rav Zvid. Oh, that's a good question. That is a good question. Maybe we'll have to think about that. Let's just see Rav Papa first. Let's see what Rav Papa's solution is, and yeah. And Omar Rav Papa, rather Rav Papa says he disagrees. Zekon elonos v'chatzi karka, right? Yeah. Zekon elonos v'chatzi karka v'zekon chatzi karka. This one acquires the trees and half the land, and the other one gets half the land. In other words, he gets land as well as his trees. Let's see the Rashbam. Leimolei. When the tree dries up, uproot your trees and get lost. And don't plant anything else in its place. Now, it's interesting. The Rashbam picks up on the fact that he can only say this once it's dried up. While the trees are still growing fruit, he can't say this. He can't say that while it's growing fruit. And even though he doesn't have land, he has got the tree as it's nourishing from the ground, because he's acquired it for his fruit, right? So even though he doesn't have the land, he's got the tree as it's nourishing from the ground, because he bought it for its fruit. Right? Right. Okay. He's got the tree. Okay. So this is absolutely clear later on in the sugya. The Gemora is going to say this in the next sugya. I think that Mar Kashisha, the son of Rav Chisda, said to Rav Ashi, if he sold him a kurkum, whatever that is. But anyway, that's the next sugya. It's clear from the next sugya. Oh, no, it's not. It's actually not Chesam. But Aleph. Okay, well, we don't have time to see that now. I'm sure we'll get there. But there, it's also clear that that he basically says clearly you've got rights to be there. I think, and they leave it. They would sell this tree, whatever. They leave it in the ground till it finishes its producing fruit, and you uproot it, right? So that's what it is, right? It needs the ground. So therefore, clearly you're allowed to keep it there whilst it's still growing fruit. And in the Mishnah, Amoiches Asfina also says, someone who buys 2 trees in his friend's field, he doesn't acquire land. And if the trees die, he has no land. Even though he doesn't have land, right? It still says you don't uproot them until they die, till the tree dies. And this is the same according to Rav Zvit. So Rashbam here has just qualified and said that the reason why Rav Papa's claim only makes sense when the trees die is because it's absolutely clear from multiple places. If I buy just trees, I can leave the trees there till they die, right? But not afterwards. Afterwards, you can get rid of them. So the question, therefore, is not as strong, really, according to Rashbam, as I made out. I sort of said it was like manifestly unjust because your trees are going to die because you're going to get rid of them straight away. It's not my land. But Rashbam has proven to us that it wasn't Rav Papa's problem. I think this helps Adavi's question, okay? Because Adavi's question, what was the Havamina? What was Rav Zvit? What was Rav Zvit saying? Oh, how can it possibly be that I have to uproot my tree straight away? The answer is you don't. And Rav Papa wasn't asking. Rav Papa wasn't saying you've got to get rid of the tree straight away. He was saying that there's nothing after the trees die, right? As soon as the trees are finished, that's right. He's saying that while it's still producing fruit, you can't say that. What? You can't. Yeah, exactly. You can't plant anything else in its place. So really, the question is a little bit the other way around. Why? Okay, so what? Maybe that's the case. You understand? Rav Zvit is saying that you get the trees and you get the land, and it sounds like the assumption is that you can replant the tree. And that Rav Papa says if you can't replant the tree, because once the tree dies, that's it. You've lost. You're finished. It's the end. And therefore, Rav Papa says that that's not the case. One gets the trees and half the land, and the other gets half the land. Says the Rashbam. It doesn't mean specifically half the land. Ella, rather, what it means is you get the land that's necessary for the trees, and underneath them and between them, and outside of them, like a worker in his basket. Alternatively, he says it does mean you get specifically half. And the case would be where all of the land is needed for the trees. If not for the fact that he sold the land to his friend. And even if there are only 2 trees, we hold in Amoiches Asfina, they don't get land if you only bought 2 trees. Here you do get land. Because since they are 2 buyers, who buy together, the owner of the trees can say to the owner of the land, just like he sold to you with a good eye, because there's only 2 of us and there's a big area of land, and he sold to you the land. So he also sold to me with a good eye. He sold to me as well there's this concept of how a seller sells. Ayin Yofer or Ayin Ra. It's mentioned many, many times in the other prokim. Later on in this Masechta, do we assume that a buyer sells with generous? Is he generous or stingy? And here, the owner of the person who bought the land, the person who bought the trees can turn around to the owner who bought the land and say, well, just like he sold to you in a generous way, so he sold to me in a generous way. And therefore, even if I've only got 2 trees, I'm entitled to half the land. And that's how it is explained later. Explained later on. It is explained later on. That's how it's explained later on. In other words, the machlokas between Rav Zvit and Rav Papa is, do we say, as Rav Zvit says, in a situation where a person sells land to 2 individuals, this one gets land and this one bought the trees. Rav Zvit says, that's fine, you get the trees, you get the land. And that's not so unjust, so you'll have the trees until they die, and then they die, you've lost it. Okay, fine. Rav Papa says that's not fair. That's not right, it doesn't make sense. And therefore, it must be that when you buy the trees, you also get some land. How much land you get? That there's 2 opinions. Rashbam has 2 ways of looking at it. Either you only get the land you need for the trees, right? And that would depend on how many trees you buy, the land in between and the bit for the workers or whatever, or it's half-half, chetzi, because of this svara that, well, he could turn around and say that since we're two buyers, we bought together, he was generous to you to give you all this land. So to me as well, he was generous and he gave me the other half of the land. It's kind of a split 50-50 in that way. Now look at the beginning of Tosfos, and this is really deals with Avi's problem. Pirush, last Tosfos, what does it mean when he says to him, Rav, what is Rav Papa's taina? If so, he says, let the owner of the land say to the owner of the trees, get rid of your trees. Pirush l'chashis yavshu, as we said, when they dry out. And even though shekachu emes l'Rav Zvid, Rav Zvid will say, yeah, that's true. Like I said before, that's true. Okay, fine. Yeah. All he gets is the trees, and he gets them as long as they're growing. Rav Papa's question was like this. He says, the ein svara, it's not logical. It's not logical. They should be able to force him to uproot the tree straight away as soon as it dries out. Kivan de gimel ilonos mochaloi. Since he sold him 3 trees, right? Since he sold him 3 trees. And it's a svara. Rav Papa is saying, right, that it's not logical that it's true. Rav Zid says, that's fine. You bought the trees as long as they're growing. Rav Papa says, that's just strange that you should have to get rid of the tree as soon as it stops growing fruit, as soon as it dies. And therefore, that's why he says it's not logical, and you must take some ownership in the land.
Unless
there is another mahalach. One second, Joe. There's another mahalach. He hasn't told us to think when he talks about that it could be the taina of Rav Papa was actually to uproot it immediately, and he's got a different way of learning the Gemora. Yeah, go on. What was that?
So unless he got to be very good deal, and they count on the fact that he doesn't get title to the land should the trees die.
I mean, he got it very cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that's another whole question with all the issues of buying and selling, which the Gemora periodically raises, I think many times, is the question of domim modiim. That means, can you tell from the price you paid? When there's a dispute over what you actually bought, so let's get back to basics. Let's work out what the figure was. And if you paid like £1, for the trees, it's quite logical you didn't actually get the land because no one was selling for that price. That's a good question. Yeah. That's a question which runs through all these doubts about buying and selling. Let's prove it from the amount that was paid. And there's a machlokas, I think, whether we say domim modiim or not. But we're out of time, so Mr. Shem will continue next time.
Do you have any appetite to do performance for Marvel back?
Are we on next week?
I think so. Since we have a month of bank holidays, we'll end up losing.
Yeah.
So they will carry on as normal. Appetite to do earlier.
Yes.
I personally don't have a problem with that. I think if people want it. No, David's suggesting that we do 6:37.
As opposed to 8 to 9.
It's always an 8 o'clock time.
Tomorrow is 6:30.
I know, but
Mine's 7:30.
yeah.
What you said, we learned before, man.
Yeah.
David's suggesting that people are not at work.
Yeah.
Then why
Next week.
on the bank holidays?
No.
David, why don't you just do a poll?
On the
Just do a poll. I'm easy with
Do we do
that.
that? Yeah.
I'm not going to work. I'm doing other things. But
Get the day off.
it's the one benefit of having an office job.